What is it about button lock knives that makes everyone want to buy one? Or 10? How's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And let me know in the comments section down below. Do you love button locks? Do you like button locks? Or are they just kind of not your thing? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. Now, what really made me want to ask this question is my journey going through the CJRB button lock lineup. And it all started with this one. This was a knife that I bought myself. This is the CJRB Wharncliffe Pyrite, a knife that had a whole lot of hype behind it because the original Pyrite was said to be evergreen. There was a few things that I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of, but I liked it overall. I thought it was good. And then CJRB reached out to me and I got this guy, the CJRB Echo. And I started to really see what people really liked about this knife, the Echo. Everyone told me that I had to get my hands on one, and then I did. And I started to think to myself, you know what? This is pretty great. And then another CJRB, the Riff, and I love this knife to pieces. It's one of my favorite blade shapes. It has a full body length fuller, plenty of jimping. It's a good size in the hand. And I thought that my button lock journey with CJRB was over, but lo and behold, it's not. Because in this box is yet another CJRB button lock, but I'm not the same guy that I was before. I'm not the same one that, reviewed the Warney Pyrite. I'm a new man. I've been reborn. Now the only question left to answer is, can they do it again? Let's find out. Just when you thought it was over, just when you thought I had reviewed all of the CJRB button locks, here's another one. And shout out to my friends over at CJRB for allowing me to take this journey of their button lock lineup. And guys, it's only fitting that we kind of go back to where we started. And what I mean by that is, I started here, and this is not one that they sent me. This is one that I actually bought myself. It's the budget-friendly $50 Warney Pyrite, or as I like to call it, the Horny Pirate. And it's a great knife. I love this blade shape. I 100% had to have this purely because I love the blade shape, but also because everyone said such great things about this knife, and I had to see if they were true. And if you're interested in my review of this knife, make sure that you hit that button right there and then come back when you're done watching that to see where we started at. But I digress. The knife that I'm looking to review today is not actually in this box. I went ahead and took the liberty of taking it out of the box, and oh my word, it's another Pyrite. But you'll notice that this one is actually quite a bit bigger than the first Pyrite, and instead of a thumb hole, it's got a thumb stud. That's right, this is in fact the CJRB large Pyrite. And guys, I'm going to go over all of the knives in this video. I'll mention them and I'll do a comparison of sorts. And if you're interested in any of them, make sure to check the description and the pinned comment down below, because I will in fact be linking them in case you haven't bought one already and you want to. Now, the beautiful thing about all of their button lock lineup is that they're all attainable. They're all affordable. They're all under 70 bucks, and you can get them in so many different variations and variants. You can even get them in very, very premium materials, which makes them pretty cool. So no matter what your materials itch is, just keep that in mind. You can get it in premium materials too. Now let's go ahead and start there, because I believe that the spec sheet is definitely worth mentioning, and I'll pop it up on the screen so that you can click the pause button if you want to go over all the nitty-gritty details. But let's start there, shall we? The blade length is 3.7 inches, which is over a ½ inch longer than the original Pyrite. It's got a stonewash finish on this, and not just on the blade, but also on the handle scales. For the blade steel, we're looking at AR RPM 9 steel. For the handle scales, it's just steel. Now, what kind of steel is it? I'm not entirely sure. As someone in the regular Pyrite video pointed out to me, it doesn't necessarily matter because you're more likely to break everything else on this knife before you actually break the steel handle scales. Now, all this steel, 100% steel, means that it's going to be on the heavier side. And when I say on the heavier side, I mean 5.3 ounces. So if you're looking for that 4-ounce knife, this one is probably going to bust over that limitation for you. But if you're not afraid of something with a little bit of heft, the steel version might actually be for you. It is a button lock. It has thumb studs for deployment. And then of course you can use that button as well. And you can do this. Especially if you are a fidgeter, the button lock seems to be a favorite for those who actually like fidgeting, but it's more than that. The button lock actually makes it easy to open and close without getting your fingers in the cutting path of that blade. Overall, we're looking at 8.7 inches, and closed, it's going to come in at about 5 inches. Now, with all of those specs gone through, it's time that we start talking about this knife in earnest, because I had some opinions about the Warney Pyrite. Now, the one that I bought seemed to have a little bit of detent lash, and as so many people pointed out to me, that's actually not common on these. In fact, this one has no detent lash. It is running on bearings, and the action is, well, it's quite smooth. The blade shape is a drop point, but it's actually very close to a spear point. We do get an adequate amount of jimping right here behind the thumb studs. And then of course you can choke up with this finger slash sharpening choil. It is adequately sized for that as well. You'll notice that in my hands, I can grip this any way I'd like, and it is in fact going to fit perfectly and have a little bit left over. For those of you who will like lanyards, you can of course attach one here. The clip is a deep carry clip of the stamped variety, and it functions rather well. I will say this, I'm not really a fan of their stock stamped clips, but if you're like me and you're not a fan of those, they do make a titanium option that can be had for about 20 bucks. I'll link that down below in case you want to spruce up your CJRB button lock. The titanium clip that I'm mentioning will actually fit all of their button lock knives and probably a few more. The ergos on this knife are good, but they're good because they don't necessarily do a lot of telling you where to put your fingers. You have this suggestion right here of, oh yeah, that's probably where you want to put your index finger. And then of course the finger slash sharpening choil right here, which allows you to choke up for that more detailed style of work. Because the handle scales themselves are on the planar side of things, it actually means that you can grip this in a variety of ways and still have it be comfortable. Reverse grip feels good on this knife. If you like a defensive reverse grip, that's going to work well. My go-to favorite, as always, is the saber grip with the thumb supporting behind the blade because I like to be in full control. Now, thank goodness for jimping, and this one definitely has an adequate amount of jimping. It's about the size of my thumb, and if you're wondering about the size of my hands, they are the average size for a man, which is to say large size gloves. For the hardware, we're looking at T8 on the pivot, T8 on the body screws, and there's not really a whole lot of body screws there, just 1, 2, and then of course on the backside 1, and then 2 pocket clip screws, which are in fact T6. The pivot is not a single-sided captive pivot, and that is something that I wish that it had. It's this tiny little nitpick, and it's not a huge deal. An improvement over the original Pyrite is this button. So while it is in fact the same design, this one is more robust, which thank goodness, because this knife is over half an inch longer than the original Pyrite. And so with all that extra weight and all that extra blade length, you want something more robust, because if it had the same size plunge as the original Pyrite or even the Warney Pyrite, it would be very weak on the detent. So to see that improve and get bigger over time is nice. It does have standoffs or barrel spacers, whatever you want to call them. I do wish that with a blade this size that they had considered a micarta backspacer or a steel backspacer, something to match whatever handle scales you get. And guys, you can in fact get this in G10 and in micarta, and I highly suggest considering whether or not the steel is for you. As it stands, I wanted to try out another full steel variant because these seem to be the most popular amongst the people that buy them, and I wanted to review the knife that made the most sense to the people that would be looking at it. The action on here is running on ceramic bearings, and it is really smooth. Whether you are reverse flicking that thumb stud or regular flicking the thumb stud or just being a nuisance, the action is pretty good. And with all of this steel, the acoustics are actually pretty good as well. Something that surprised me about this knife is its balance. I feel like the balance is really, really good. And you know, when you have a heavier knife, the balance means a lot because a well-balanced blade, even when it's heavier, feels better in the hand than a lighter knife that is maybe handle heavy or blade heavy. And so the balance point on here is pretty good. It's going to be right there where they have that finger cut out for your index finger in the regular position, and it feels great. The weight is evenly distributed, the balance is perfect, and with this knife I think that this could make one hell of a steak cutter. So if you're like me and you go to steak houses and you're forever disappointed in the cutlery at the steakhouse, this might be one to check out because it will definitely get the job done. Now, I promised you that I'd go ahead and put this up against the other button lock knives in the CJRB lineup, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll start off with the Warney Pyrite. That's this guy right here. Next up, the Echo, which is slightly bigger, also designed by Reccomended. It's the only one in this lineup that's not an in-house design. And then a bit bigger is the CJRB Riff. Now this is where we started to get into the hefty range as far as knife sizes are concerned. And then finally we have the large Pyrite. Now as you can see, things got progressively bigger, right? The Pyrite is a very carry friendly knife, small knife, easy to carry. It's going to meet a lot of blade laws. And then of course the Echo integrated a front flipper to go along with that deployment hole, and of course a nice belly right here. Classic Reccomended lines on this one. And then of course we move up to the Riff, and the Riff is one of my favorites, possibly my favorite. It's chunky, it's beefy, it's got this really stout feel to it in the pocket. Flipper, and instead of a deployment hole thumb studs or front flipper, it's got this fuller and then a rear flipper. And then finally, the large Pyrite. Now the large Pyrite is the longest knife out of all of these. Blade profile, it's actually going to be very similar carry wise to the Riff, but it is going to be a bit longer. So if you do like a bigger knife, these two are going to be ones that you want to check out. If you want something that's a bit smaller, a bit easier in the pocket, maybe you wear gym shorts a lot, these two are going to be good ones to check out. Something that they all have in common is that button lock bloodline. None of these have lock stick. I haven't experienced that at all. They're all very carry friendly. The ergos are good on all of them, and they all have this pocket clip which begs to be replaced with the titanium replacement. The action is fantastic. They're all fidgety. They all have good lockup and good blade centering. Speaking of which, yeah, there is no blade play. Blade centering, yep, that is bang on. This is one knife in 4 variations, and I don't think a lot of people look at it that way, but I do, because if you were to hand me one of these and then I was to handle another one, they all have very similar feel, even though the handle scales are different, even though the weight is going to be a little bit different, even though you can get these in different materials. It really feels like they designed one knife 4 times. And then they said, well, you know what? Maybe people don't want micarta. Maybe they don't want steel handle skills. Maybe they want something more premium. And that's why you can get something like this. So yeah, if S90V titanium and carbon fiber is your jam, make sure to check that out because they are in fact limited. I do really like this button lock lineup, and I can tell you that from the start of my journey, it only got better. The Warney Pyrite is a good knife, but it's not my favorite. The Echo really started to make me a believer. The ray conical design lines on this knife and the ergonomics combined for a really, really solid piece. And then I fell in love with the Riff. And the Riff speaks to me on so many levels with the blade shape, the overbuilt thickness of the blade, the feel of the micarta, the ergos that lock you in, and this sawtooth jimping. I really love the Riff. And then finally, to bring it full circle, the large Pyrite. The large Pyrite is for a specific group of people. And it's for the people that bought a regular size Pyrite and said, I love it, but I wish that it was bigger. I want a bigger knife. Because let's face it, some of us have extra large size hands. Maybe some of us wanted something that felt a bit more substantial in the hand, something that seemed like a full use knife instead of just an EDC knife. That's where this comes in. That's who this is for. This is for the people that want something bigger. For the people that think that size does matter, and for those of you who also want to add to their collection. It makes me wonder, how many other people out there have this exact same lineup, where they have the Pyrite, the Echo, the Riff, and the large Pyrite? And if you were to see another variation from them with the button lock, what would that be like? Do they have a design out there that you think would be fantastic if it was in fact a button lock? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you want to check out my review of my favorite out of all four of these, the Riff, make sure you click on the video that pops up next.